the theme of the sutra is to show how the Buddha deals with the violation of moral ethics in this particular case, or from this level. And so it begins with a monk who is going around, begging for alms, and not knowing that one of those houses is the house of a prostitute. She invites him in, and he enters and requests for some alms, and she was overcome with desire for the monk and wanted to seduce him, and the monk rejected, and he said he would rather die than break his vows. And she then pretended that she would consent to that, and she would never ask him to break his vows, but then she poisoned him. She put some intoxicants into his meal that she offered to him, and he became intoxicated, and he broke his vow with this prostitute. And after he became sober again, he had a very strong regret, and he felt he would go to the hell realms, and there is no other solution for him than to go to the hell realms because he broke his vow. And so he was lamenting and crying, and he broke down on the way to the temple, and then Manjushri, the youth from Manjushri, came and lifted him up, and then he shared his story with him, and Manjushri brought him to the Buddha, knowing that the Buddha could help him. And so then when he met the Buddha, then the Buddha, he was so embarrassed that he couldn't even tell his own story, so Manjushri told it for him. And so then the Buddha gave a historical account, and he said many eons in the past there was this merchant's family, and there was this really beautiful daughter. And so then one day a monk came to ask for alms, and the beautiful daughter fell in love with him, and he was very virtuous, and so he left, and she was heartbroken, and she couldn't tell anyone. So she knew she couldn't have this monk because this is not correct, and so she suffered to herself, and she stopped eating. She wanted to die, and so finally, just on the verge of death, of starving, dying from starvation, then she told her girlfriends that she had fallen in love with this monk, and then the girlfriends couldn't bear it. They had to tell her mother. And so then the mother actually also didn't want to bring her together with a monk, but she didn't want her daughter to die, so she had to trick the monk. And so she told the monk, my daughter wants to learn the Dharma. Would you kindly teach her the Dharma? And I said, of course, I would agree to do that. And so he came, and he saw this girl being really sick. And he asked, why is she so sick? And the mother said, it's my fault. It's because I didn't allow her to learn the Dharma. But now she was almost dying, so I had to bring you. You have to teach her. And so he's a bodhisattva, so of course he wanted to teach her. And so he came regularly to teach her the Dharma, and so slowly they fell in love. And he broke his vows, and they had this relation. And but then this girl had a suitor that wanted to marry her, and so he was very jealous, and he wanted to kill the monk. And then the rumors were going around, and the monk heard about it, that this suitor wanted to kill him. And so he was so afraid that he thought, I should kill the suitor. And so he gave her some yogurt with poison. He said, you have to kill this suitor. And she said, I can't kill this suitor. And he said, if you love me, then you will kill this suitor. Of course you love him. So then she gave this yogurt to the maid, and the maid offered to the suitor. He ate it, and he died. And so then after he died, the monk was overcome with regret. And he felt that not only did I break my vows, and for sake of doing that, I even killed a person. There is nothing worse than that. I have to go to the hell realms. And so again, the Buddha came to lift him up, and he gave him teachings, explaining to him, asking him, by means of asking him questions, like, what is this mind of desire that arose in you? And so the Buddha tried to make him understand by asking him questions, and he finally realized that the mind is emptiness. And based on this realization, he gained this level of the patient acceptance that all phenomena are unborn, which is like apparently an accomplishment that one attains at the 8th Bodhisattva Bhumi. And so that was the story. And then we come back to the present time of the Buddha, when he was teaching this monk, and so the Buddha said that if you study this sutra, then even if you have done things like this monk, then you can attain this patient forbearance that realizes the unborn nature of phenomena. And so therefore practice this sutra. It was interesting, like you said, how he handled the violation of a monastic vow, because monastic vow comes from the Vinaya system. So if it comes from there, you would think that you also observe it according to the Vinaya system, and when it is broken, it is dealt with the Vinaya system. So that is not the impression I got, though, from the sutra. Although he held this Vinaya vow, a monastic vow, the Buddha didn't deal with it in that way. The Buddha dealt with it from the Mahayana perspective, the 6 paramitas, and the real nature of desire, emptiness. And this I found really actually interesting, and actually very, even more effective. I was quite impressed that, that through keeping the Buddha's method always seems to be asking the questions back, to the student who made a mistake, and then they gave the Buddha an answer, their understanding, and then he asked them back, and then they find their fault. They figure it out themselves by being asked so many questions. So the Buddha teaches by means of having them see it for themselves, and then it's very effective, because then it's not just some kind of punishment that you don't really understand, but then you may go back to it, you may not realize anything, but actually he realized something there, and that is why he probably became completely free of any kind of vow breaking, and that is completely purified, and it will never happen again, because now he's a bodhisattva. So that I found really good. And also I found it really nice how the Buddha was teaching the 6 paramitas. Also very interesting perspective, actually, because he said that if you have love or bodhicitta, then you have the 6 paramitas. And that's actually something that Garshan Rinpoche always teaches, It's not that you practice this and this and this, because the Buddha actually said then there's those monks who practice patience, and then they scold everyone else who doesn't practice patience, because they have really no compassion. They just are very proud about their own discipline, or their own practice, or their own samadhi, or their own moral ethics, their vows, and then they look down on those monks who break their vows. There's just no compassion. And so the Buddha said, like, this is not the way to practice the 6 paramitas. It is not the way to keep moral ethics, with a rigid mind that then looks down on everyone who doesn't, but rather with a compassionate mind that feels very sorry for those who don't. So this I found really nice too. So it's really beautiful to see, because I see that also our teachers are actually teaching the words of the Buddha. It's the actual word of the Buddha what they're saying.